After the anti-fascist protest on January 19th in Vilnius, the Office of the Prosecutor General was asked to investigate the desecration of a Lithuanian historical national symbol, the so-called Pillars of Gediminas. In the protest, this symbol, used in the Middle Ages by the Lithuanian nobility, was crossed out on one of the posters. Following the anti-fascist protest of 10 individuals, the feminists who participated there became targets of a vengeful wave of terror. This special edition of our feminist internet show expresses our concerns about the security of these women and about what lurks behind the shadows that the Pillars of Gediminas cast over Lithuania. The symbol in question, which landed on the desk of the Prosecutor General, was drawn with a marker on a piece of paper and simply crossed out. No actual Pillars of Gediminas were broken, torn down, or otherwise destroyed. Yet this was sufficient for far-right radicals to put together their complaint and accuse the demonstrators as being part and parcel of a global anti-fascist conspiracy against Lithuania, funded by Brussels and instigated by Moscow. In fact, the ambition behind these pillars drawn by marker on paper was rather modest. Its task was similar to your usual eye and vision examination. The pillars were crossed out because the feminists who stood up to protest against fascism wanted to be explicit about what many of us in Lithuania choose not to see during the annual neo-Nazi processions. The anti-fascist poster was meant to raise awareness about what is presented as patriotism in Lithuania. People who exercise neo-Nazi beliefs appropriate patriotic symbols and Lithuania's historical past to preach hate speech. Lithuanian patriotism has already become synonymous with a mob howling Lithuania for Lithuanians. When last year some local public figures tried to celebrate Lithuania's Day of Independence without this vengeful howl, party balloons became their only alternative to Baltic swastikas and armbands made of national colors. Many choose to ignore parallels between neo-Nazism and national symbols. This is especially the case if one encounters Lithuanian neo-Nazism only once a year, during the annual patriotic procession that takes place on the day when Lithuania's independence was restored in 1990. For far-right radicals, this commemoration has become an excuse to blend their beliefs with Baltic mythology and nostalgia for Lithuania's greatness during the Middle Ages. It is easy to fail to notice the growth of neo-Nazism in this small country, which has been wounded by many occupations. In fact, last year in the patriotic procession, and like 5 years ago, no one screamed out loud, "Juden raus!" In the front lines of this crowd, young women marched dressed in costumes reminiscent of ancient Baltic priestesses. These women were meant to excite the spectators about patriotism. In the meantime, full-time male members of these annual patriotic processions can be increasingly spotted in Lithuania's universities, where they perform unreliable academic work. They become employees of state archives where they corrupt Lithuania's interwar history. They run for seats in local and parliamentary elections. Neo-Nazi boys have grown up. They learn to confront their critics differently. Neo-Nazi leaders have warned their altar boys to avoid physical violence at any cost. No one draws swastikas on the houses where Marxists live. In official speeches, far-right radicals do not instigate direct violence due to political beliefs, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. These days, the patriots no longer oppose the gay and lesbian pride. That is, if once again the pride takes place on some remote street, with queers fenced off from the public as if they were animals. Those who become targets of far-right extremism are accused of paranoia, and it is easy to be persuaded by such accusations. Those targeted with hate speech have a hard time proving its existence on numerous internet forums, blogs, and social networks. Police officers commonly cannot be bothered when you seek legal charges against those who perpetuate hate speech. Prosecutors claim that these identities cannot be established. Either their Facebook profile images are too small or IP addresses get changed too rapidly. In the meantime, neo-Nazis continue to instigate their terror against particular individuals. Only a small number of them have the guts to make their experiences known to the public. Our society tends to naively believe that those of us who oppose neo-Nazism are seeing ghosts. Most of the country still finds relief in the fact that patriots are barking online but do not execute physical violence. Neo-Nazi strategies are of a subtle kind. For example, when 600 Lithuanian citizens sign a petition against the patriotic procession, the names of these hundreds of people get posted online. The patriots label this list as informative and invaluable. While many naively believe that nothing improper is happening underneath the pillars of Gediminas, misrepresented details about the divorce of one human rights activist are circulated online. Patriots get excited in strangers' bedsheets, even when they have grown cold long time ago. Patriots get aroused when they call a woman who escaped domestic violence a whore. These patriots get turned on when they use photographs of their critics to make trashy photo collages with horns and pitchforks and insulting headlines. Patriots find their poor Photoshop skills titillating as they remake anti-fascist posters. And behold, in these remakes, an anarcho-feminist becomes a communist. In order to perpetuate fear, the internet is no longer sufficient for neo-Nazis. After the anti-fascist protest in Vilnius, once the journalist left, one of the full-time patriots who was loitering around the protesters called one of them, a woman, a freak of nature. After a few days, a group of patriots recognized another participant of the protest on the street and started screaming, "Slut." A few more days passed, and someone tried to break into the apartment of two feminists who also took part in the protest. They do not know whether the attempt to break in was a coincidence, yet given the circumstances, anyone would get scared, and perhaps she would start believing that she indeed suffers from paranoia. These incidents, which are no longer limited to Facebook activities, happened in January 2013. They snowballed after 10 people took their guts to state in public that in Lithuania patriotism and national identity, along with their symbols, have been appropriated by far-right radicals. And therefore, in the same protest, one more symbol was crossed out, a so-called three-edged Baltic swastika, the symbol of the Union of Patriotic Lithuanian Youth, one of the organizers of annual patriotic processions. These symbolic figurations of Lithuanian identity were crossed out because in our country today far-right radicals use Baltic mythology and nostalgia for our nation's once upon a time glorious, albeit brief past. This intoxicating cocktail of far-right politics, Baltic myths and historical fragments is used to instigate and perpetuate hatred. The women anarchists and feminists who became targets of neo-Nazi terror after the protest on January 19th face a difficult situation. Some anarchists doubt whether they should seek help from the inadequate judicial system. Especially male anarchists in Lithuania are not in favor of such measures for an obvious reason, in order to demonstrate their unfaltering masculinity. One thing is clear. One strategy is no longer sufficient to fight far-right nationalism in Lithuania. It is not sufficient to rely on the inadequate judicial system. Neither it is sufficient to rely on Facebook activism. And it is no longer sufficient to uncover instances of Lithuanian neo-Nazism for the Lithuanian audience only. Therefore, this feminist show claims solidarity with those whom the patriots called whores and freaks of nature. Our solidarity is a sign of urgency. an urgency to admit in public that underneath our Lithuanian pillars thrives sexual nationalism, and it rapidly mutates into Neo-Nazism.